My name is Emily. I'm 34 years old, and I work as a nurse. A few months ago, I attended my stepsister Lily's wedding reception. I arrived quietly, wearing a simple blue dress and carrying a small wrapped gift. I didn't want attention. I just wanted to show my support, congratulate her, and enjoy the evening like any other guest. But something happened that night, something I never expected. And it all started during the dinner reception. The ballroom was beautiful. Golden lights hung softly from the ceiling, casting a warm glow across the room. White flowers decorated every table, and a live band played gentle music near the stage. Guests were dressed in elegant suits and sparkling jewelry. Everything looked perfect, like something out of a movie. Lily looked exactly how she always liked to look, confident, radiant, and completely in control of the room. She loved attention, and tonight she had plenty of it. I sat quietly near the end of a long table, smiling politely as conversations moved around me. People were talking about travel plans, business deals, and the couple's upcoming honeymoon. I mostly listened. Then suddenly Lily stood up. She picked up her glass and tapped it with a spoon. The soft clink, clink, clink echoed through the room, and conversation slowly faded as everyone turned to look at her. She smiled brightly, enjoying the moment. Then she pointed directly at me. "This is my stepsister," she announced loudly. For a moment I thought she was about to say something kind. Instead, she laughed and added, "She's just a useless nurse." A few guests laughed immediately. Others chuckled politely, unsure how to react. I felt dozens of eyes turned toward me. But I didn't argue. I didn't get angry. I simply smiled and looked down at the table. Working as a nurse had taught me something important. Sometimes silence says more than words. But at that exact moment, something strange happened. The groom's father, who had been quietly eating beside Mark, suddenly stopped. His fork froze halfway to his plate. He stared at me very carefully, like he was trying to remember something important. Slowly, he leaned forward. "Wait," he said, squinting slightly. "Aren't you the nurse who?" Then he stopped. Mid-sentence. The entire table went quiet. Mark looked confused. "Dad?" he asked. But the older man didn't answer right away. He kept studying my face, like a memory was just out of reach. "Before I continue the story, I want to ask you something. Where are you watching this from? Tell me in the comments. And what time is it in your country right now? I'm always curious to see how many different places people are listening from. Also, if you enjoy real-life stories like this one, don't forget to like the video and subscribe. It really helps the channel grow." Now, back to the wedding. Dinner continued, and the conversation slowly returned. Guests started discussing honeymoon destinations, business trips, and vacation homes. The band kept playing soft music in the background. But I noticed something. The groom's father kept glancing at me across the table. Not in a rude way. More like he was trying to solve a puzzle. Finally, he looked directly at me and asked politely, "Have we met somewhere before?" I shrugged gently. "Maybe," I said. "I meet a lot of people through work." He nodded slowly, still thinking. Then, just before standing up from the table, he said something that made my stomach tighten. "I'm sure I've seen you," he said quietly. "During a very important moment in my life." The rest of the evening, I couldn't stop wondering. Where could he possibly know me from? The wedding party continued. Music swelled, guests laughed, clinked glasses, and slowly moved to the dance floor. But I couldn't shake it. Throughout the evening, the groom's father kept glancing at me. Not in a casual way. He was studying me, like he was piecing together a memory he couldn't quite place. Mark noticed his father's unusual focus. "Dad, is everything okay?" he asked quietly. The older man nodded, but his attention never wavered. His eyes were fixed on me, scanning my face like a photograph from a distant moment. I tried to ignore it, focusing on the table in front of me, but the tension was unmistakable. Something significant was surfacing, and I had no idea what it could be. The band took a short break 20 minutes later. Guests returned to their seats, chatting softly, the room full of the casual chatter of a wedding in full swing. But when the groom's father walked back toward our table, everything shifted. His expression was different this time, more deliberate, more certain, like he had finally solved the puzzle that had been gnawing at him all evening. He leaned in slightly and asked a question that made my stomach tighten. "Emily, did you work at St. Mary's Hospital 3 years ago?" I blinked, surprised. "Yes," I said. His eyes softened as he exhaled slowly. That look, half relief, half recognition, told me he finally remembered. Mark leaned in, confused. "Dad, what's going on?" The older man's gaze shifted to his son. 3 years ago, he began, his voice steady, I was in a terrible car accident. The room went quiet. Everyone stopped mid-conversation, the laughter and clinking of glasses fading as people instinctively leaned in. He continued, recounting that night. Roads were blocked by a massive protest. Many doctors couldn't reach the hospital in time. He had been weak, barely conscious, fighting for every breath while waiting for medical attention. Hours stretched endlessly. But during those hours, one person never left his side. A nurse. She had checked his pulse, monitored his breathing, and kept talking to him, ensuring he didn't drift away. Then he pointed slowly toward me. That nurse was her. The entire table went silent. I felt every eye on me, the weight of the moment settling like a heavy blanket. Mark's face shifted from confusion to shock. "You saved my dad?" he asked. "I was just doing my job," I replied quietly. "No," the older man said firmly. "You did much more than that." Then, his gaze moved toward Lily, and his tone hardened. "You introduced her as just a nurse." The room collectively held its breath. Whispers started to ripple across tables. Guests who had laughed at Lily's joke now looked uneasy. Mark stood, walked to me, and offered his hand. "Thank you. I truly mean that," he said sincerely. For the rest of the evening, the energy had shifted. I was no longer just the quiet stepsister. I had saved a life, and everyone there knew it. Lily remained silent. Her confidence, so apparent before, had vanished. For the first time in years, she had nothing to say. I thought to myself quietly as the night went on, sometimes the most profound victories aren't loud or dramatic. Sometimes, they come simply from the truth finally speaking for itself. The wedding continued, but the energy in the room had shifted. Guests were still chatting, glasses clinking, and soft music playing, yet every so often, I caught the groom's father glancing in my direction. There was a weight to his gaze now, one that spoke of recognition, of memory finally settling into place. He leaned forward across the table, his voice calm but firm. 3 years ago, I was in a terrible car accident. The room went silent. Conversations halted mid-sentence, laughter stopped, and all eyes turned toward us. Every guest felt the gravity of what was about to be revealed. Roads were blocked by a protest, he continued, his voice steady. Many doctors couldn't reach the hospital in time. I was weak. Barely conscious. Fighting for every breath. He paused, letting the silence stretch. I could feel the tension. Then, he pointed toward me. During those critical hours, there was one person who stayed by my side. One nurse. She monitored my pulse, kept my breathing steady, and never left me alone. She kept talking to me, even when I couldn't respond, to make sure I stayed awake, that I stayed alive. All eyes fell on me. That nurse was Emily, he said, and the words hung in the air like a spotlight. Mark's mouth dropped open. You saved my dad? I shook my head humbly. I was just doing my job, I said quietly. No, the older man said, shaking his head. You did far more than that. The room's energy shifted entirely. Guests who had earlier laughed at Lily's comment now looked embarrassed. Whispered murmurs spread across tables. For the first time, people weren't seeing me as the quiet stepsister. They were seeing someone who had saved a life. Then, he turned his attention slowly toward Lily, his expression serious. You introduced her as just a nurse, he said, his tone sharp. Never underestimate someone who saves lives. Lily froze. Her confident smile faltered. She looked down at her plate, saying nothing. For the first time in years. She had no response, no retort, no spotlight to steal. The room, once her stage, had shifted entirely. Mark stood, walked around the table, and extended his hand to me. Thank you. Truly, he said. His sincerity was palpable, and the other guests nodded in agreement. Respect replaced the earlier amusement. I realized in that moment that social perception can change in a heartbeat. The woman everyone had quietly judged now held the room's attention, not through wealth or status, but through courage and compassion. For the rest of the evening, Lily avoided looking at me. Her silence said more than words ever could. As I watched the celebration continue, I reflected quietly, sometimes the loudest victories don't come from revenge. They come from truth quietly asserting itself. And on that night, in that golden-lit room filled with music and chatter, everyone learned an important lesson: never underestimate someone just because of their job, especially when that job means saving lives. And in that moment, I realized something else. Recognition, respect, and integrity are far more powerful than humiliation ever could be.